Chapter 14. The Truth. Shit. A fireball raced across the mock soldier gym, a ginger/black-haired boy running for his life in front of it. Stepping into the room once more, Hermione felt her eyes go wide as she watched Fred dive to the side, barely avoiding the fireball. She thought they were joking. But no, here she is just back from the library and Genesis was hucking fireballs at Fred, who was now running for his life across the gym. "Who's up for Gongaka fried puppy?" Genesis laughed as Zack kept and dived under the bleachers. "Genesis, stop tormenting my puppy." Angel groaned and moved over to the edge of the bleachers and peered over, seeing Zack hunkered down under them. "Puppy, that's a very bad spot to hide in." "Shut up, Angel." Moving into the room, Hermione looked around, the book clutched to her chest. Her eyes spied the Turks at the other end going through their cooldowns and the others hanging around, but she did not see Harry. "Where is Harry?" Angel and Genesis both looked to her, shocked to see her back. "Hold on. Hey Seth." Genesis moved so he was standing in the middle of the gym and looking up at the huge suspended mat. A moment later, Harry's head stuck out from over the edge and looked down at them. "What?" "Our friend wants to talk to you." Those green eyes that she could see even from 20 feet above her moved to look at her. "What do you want, Hermione?" His voice was exasperated, sounding like he really didn't want to deal with her. Moving out onto the gym floor, she kept her eyes up on Harry, book still clutched to her chest. "Sephiroth. Calamity's son. The nightmare." She watched as Harry's eyes instantly went guarded, their depths shutting off completely behind a wall of ice. Blinking, she looked around, seeing almost everyone had fallen silent and was now watching her. Swallowing hard, she looked over just in time to see Harry land gracefully in front of her. How in Merlin's name did he jump from that high up and not get hurt? What she had read in the book was starting to make more and more sense now as she watched Harry stalk towards her, a very deadly grace to his every movement. He stopped only feet from her, those cold acid green eyes glaring at her. "What do you know?" Swallowing hard, Hermione held out the book. Page 57. Taking the book from her, Sephiroth flipped to the page and instantly recoiled, his eyes moving over the words quickly. Sighing softly, he shut the book and handed it back to her. "That will haunt me till the day I die." Again. "So it's true?" "Every word of it," he said, locking eyes with her. He wasn't going to lie and say Jenova was the one that killed the village of Nibelheim. No, that had been all him. Everything after Nibelheim he could very easily blame on Jenova. "Seth, it wasn't completely your fault. I know the role I played in your fall from grace." Genesis moved over and wrapped his arms around Sephiroth, holding him tightly. "I could never forgive myself once I regained my own sense of self for what I did to you." Looking away, Sephiroth cocked his arm forward before slamming his elbow as hard as he could right into Genesis' unprotected gut. Gasping, the Crimson Commander fell to the ground, the wind completely knocked out of him. "There. We're even." Zax burst out laughing from where he was sitting on the bleachers, happy to see Jen flat on his back for once. Grinning at his lover, Harry turned back to his once friend, seeing her staring at him with concerned brown eyes. Even though the dominant part of Sephiroth's personality was trying to tell him to tell Hermione to go fuck herself, the Harry part of him, the one that loved Hermione as a dear friend, was clamoring to tell her the truth. For once the Harry part of his personality won out. Sighing softly, he looked to Hermione once more. "If you are willing to listen with an open mind, I am willing to tell you everything. But remember, this does not leave you. Do you understand?" The threat of another torture session was very clear, and she was nodding her head quickly. Placing a hand on her shoulder, Sephiroth led her back over to the bleachers and sat her down. For the next hour he sat explaining everything that he could. Genesis, Angel, Zack and Turks would throw in information that he didn't have or was too painful to say. Hermione was quiet, only occasionally interrupting to ask a question when the details became confusing. As he was talking, he saw a series of emotions crossing her face, everything from anger to sadness. Harry. Sephiroth. Before Sephiroth could respond, Hermione launched at him, wrapping her arms around him, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I was just so worried about you, I didn't know what else to do." Everything sounded just too fictional. She clutched onto him tighter, not wanting to let her dear friend go. Her own stupidity had nearly destroyed their friendship. Ron, she didn't know, she honestly believed Ron had completely destroyed the friendship and was more than likely going to destroy the relationship between his family if he went after Fred, George and Ginny. No, Zach, Reno, and Cisnai. Seeing Sephiroth was once more uncomfortable with people touching him, even Hermione. Cisnai moved up and pulled Hermione away. "Come on, Herm, one thing you need to learn now that Harry has been overrun by Sephiroth. He's not a very touchy man. He wants to be touched, he will touch you first. Though if you want to appease him." Reaching into Genesis' bag, she pulled out the energy drink and held it out to Hermione. "See." Hermione actually flushed, seeing Sephiroth now had his full undivided attention on her, well, more like the can of sugary crack. Wanting to test something out, that she moved the can to the side and bit her tongue to keep from laughing as his head and eyes followed the can. It was like watching a kitten with a string right before they pounced. The Turks up on the benches were all laughing, seeing Sephiroth being well. Sephiroth, sighing, shook his head. "He can be pissed at the world, but you hold a can of Monster in front of him and he's instant putty. See? That's what I needed when I confronted him at the reactor. I should have just held a can of Monster in front of him and he would have completely forgotten about the alien bitch." Still not taking his eyes off the sugary crack, Sephiroth flipped him off. Albus frowned down at the letter in his hand. The Ministry had gotten word of Harry and the group's sudden changes, and they were sending a group of Aurors out in the next few days to put the boys under questioning and put them through a series of curse evaluations to make sure that they hadn't in fact been cursed. They were also going to make a sweep of Hogsmeade because of reports of Genesis being seen among the village. The eccentric auburn-haired man didn't exactly try and hide himself when he was walking among the village. He was always seen in two versions of a red leather duster. One was a solid red leather duster with black leather shoulder guards, where the second was the same basic design, only black straps wrapped around his shoulder and waist, and he wore only one leather shoulder guard. Either way, the man stood out like sore thumb, but he seemed to enjoy the attention, as most the female population of Hogsmeade had fallen in love with the man. Even Dumbledore could admit that the man was highly charismatic. He could probably charm Voldemort out of his hiding hole if he wanted to, and the way he recited Lovelace just had all the women pooling at his feet. Two other strange men had been reported around Genesis. One was a young man probably no older than 23, with gravity-defying golden blonde spikes, wearing an outfit similar in design to Genesis though without the long coat. He was said to almost always be carrying around a very large sword that was resting in a harness on his back. The sword size would suggest it was extremely heavy, but the boy carted it around like it weighed nothing, more than likely a feather-light charm on it. The third was a man in all black leather that carried a mulligan on his thigh. This one had caught Dumbledore's attention almost instantly. A man with black hair and brightly glowing crimson eyes, the same eyes that the wolf at the opening feast had. Though if he were honest with himself, he was nervous about the minister and his minions coming to the school to question the boys. Harry's threat still lingered in the forefront of his mind. Harry had once told him that Hogwarts was his home, that he enjoyed being here, but now with this sudden change he was threatening to bring the school to the ground simply to protect a man he only just met. Albus did not like not having any information on what was going on. He did not like it at all. "And we lost them." Zach was sat up on the bleachers, his chin in his hands, as he watched a few feet away. Genesis and Hermione were now completely engrossed in comparing their theses and view on Lovelace. though right now it was more Hermione hanging on the auburn-haired man's every word, as this world only had a few short verses of the extensive play. Of course, the fireball known as Genesis was more than happy to oblige a new listener to his ranting about his beloved play. After a few months his normal audience had grown tired of it. Sephiroth used to stuff one of his chocolate bars in Genesis' mouth just to shut him up for a minute. Unless they were alone in the bedroom, then he would shoving something else in the redhead's mouth to shut him up. Sending Masamune away, Sephiroth shook his head, seeing Genesis was still prattling on. He did love the man to death, just sometimes he wished he had a roll of duct tape so he could duct tape that man's mouth shut. "Any ideas on where we can put the VR room?" he asked, moving over to where Ino was currently sitting smoking a cig. How the hell the boy kept getting them he had no idea. Knowing Rena, he found a spell to make them. "We could always make a room here. You have the room set up one similar to the VR room and then just go through and hook up all the electronics ourselves. You do you think you can do that after the Hogsmeade weekend?" Sephiroth sat down absently, running his fingers through his quickly silvering hair. "If you can cover for my ass, I can have it up in a few days if I skip class. If I got to attend class it could take a few weeks. I'm sure Zack can cover for you in some way." He smiled, lifting his seventh can of liquid crack to his lips. He suddenly shivered violently, green eyes moving towards the door. Something was going on out in the school and he didn't like it.
Well, I do hope you enjoyed the videos so far and video game content. And don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment down below. And I noticed 40% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel. If you can, please subscribe to the channel. It'll help me and help the channel grow. Until next time, goodbye!